It's Tuesday, divisional weekend of the playoffs finally, and it's good to be back. Um, and Ron here. We're going to be having a unscripted conversation because we have contacted each other about the least we have since last summer over the last week or so. So we're going to catch each other up on some things. We're going to talk football. We may talk some strategy, observation. I'm not entirely sure, but we will make it constructive, and we encourage audience participation.
Yeah.
With that in mind, I would like to send my congratulations to you, Ron. I watched the show last week, and I thought you did a very, very nice job. Uh, and I feel like I don't mind being behind in talent wise from Ted, the 25 or the lifelong veteran of national media. I'll never be as good as he is, uh, but I may be the third banana out of you three guys. You did a great job, Ron.
I appreciate the comments. It was my first foray into the banner business. So that was good. And, we had the games to talk about. Of course, I've known Ted for 50 years, so probably a little bit more than that, actually. So it's kind of easy striking up a conversation with him, and that helped a lot as well. But, it's always good talking about football. We missed you last week. We had to throw in some winners without you, so I'm may have left a couple out off the table, so you can give us your takes this week, and we'll move forward.
You know what I want to start it with is Trevor Lawrence, because I saw this guy about a third of the way into the season, and he did not have the posture, the mannerisms of a winning quarterback. And he would pout on the sidelines. He was distant from his teammates, and he was out of it. And watching that game, after the third interception, I looked at that guy, and I did not see one iota of loss of confidence in that guy. I knew 100% in my mind he wasn't rattled in the least. This guy could be something really, really special. I'm very confident that he does not have a weak mental sort of outlook. I really feel that was a difficult situation, and I think he left us a little doubt that he was resilient.
Yeah, I think you're very right about that. You could see where he sat or where he stood on the sidelines. You could see everything about him was different, certainly than last year with Urban Meyer. And now this year, now that he has a coach that understands the quarterback position so well, couldn't get the turnover out of him. I mean, obviously an awful first half. When you turn the ball over as much as Jacksonville did, you're giving 3.5 points per turnover, 17.5 points to the opposing team. But there was no panic at halftime. They came back out. They exercised their game plan. They got a lot of help from the Chargers in game management and clock management, but they still had to do it. And they had to do it in a way that they were down 10 in the fourth quarter and managed to win the game.
That was one of the few games. There's a handful of games every season where you just sit there and you groan because and it's just frustrating, and you feel either sad, you feel a different emotion because it was so painful to see that pass interference, which would have put the Jags in the red zone, go uncalled and becoming his second interception. That changed the whole flow. And then you're sitting there expecting a makeup call. The announcers are telling you it's a horrible call also. And you're not getting a makeup call. And it just keeps getting worse and worse. And I just felt so bad for the Jags at that point because it reminded me of the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game last season when there was a horrible pass interference call that changed the whole tide of that game. And Baltimore was going to steamroll Pittsburgh, and they just gifted the ball to Pittsburgh, and the entire flow of the game changed. And I just hate to see that in games. And obviously we saw that with Baltimore and that horrible 14-point swing.
Yeah, I mean, games can hinge on obviously one fluke play, one drop of an 80-yard pass that slips through a receiver's hands. You hope the referees don't impact a game. I've been doing this for 40 plus years, and I've seen bad referee calls left, right, and center. And for the most part, I just move on. I'm thankful when I don't even have any stake in the game, so I don't get emotional about it. But you just got to move on. And these are human beings playing a super tough game to referee. I usually get a lot more irritated when a coach just does such a stupid thing. And John Harbaugh, for example, he did that 2 or 3 times. Miami didn't make any adjustments with the fact that the play clock was running down time after time after time in the fourth quarter in a game they could have stolen from Buffalo. A lot of these elite teams barely won last week, and it was only because the team, the underdog, just wasn't perfect at the right time. They just couldn't pull it off at the right time. Those are the things that irritate me more. Just seeing human error from players and coaches, that's just inexcusable when you have people up in the booth, upstairs, and so on, that should be, their sole job should be clock management or time management.
Well, you see the banner I created. You already touched on it. Last night's game was a rare occurrence where McCarthy was clearly the better coach coming into the game, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Tampa Bay. I hope Tom Brady retires. I don't want to see him be the Willie Mays of the NFL and just stay on too long. Yeah. Could he play next season and get through it? Yeah. But, geez, I don't think it's going to be that pretty. I mean, it's not like he's going to go out and embarrass himself. But, why do it? Why do it? What do you think?
Well, he's got to find the perfect fit between offensive line, head coach, competitive. He's not going to go to a team that has a chance to go 8-9. Not at this point in his career. He needs to go to a team that has a chance to win it all, and a lot of those jobs are filled up. He's still a top-tier quarterback, but I've said this, I think I started saying it about 3 weeks ago, and I started saying it with you. It's a league right now where if you hire defensive coaches as head coaches, they're almost behind the 8 ball. Tampa's coach is a defensive coach, and you could see it in the play calling in the offense and what's going on with that side of the ball. And there's a couple of other examples of that. And you have the flip side where the New York Giants, they don't have a great team player-wise, but they hire an offensive coach and they get the most out of Daniel Jones. They get the most out of comeback player of the year, Saquon Barkley. They get the most out of guys that were on practice squads for other teams, like Isaiah Hodgkins, the wide receiver, who was on Buffalo's practice squad, and now he's catching 8-9 passes a game for the New York Giants. It's an offensive league, and I think if you're going to be a defensive coach, then you better trust your offense to one of the best and smartest offensive coordinators you can find. Otherwise, you're going to fail.
It's going to be extremely painful to see the Lions lose their offensive coordinator. I forget his name at the moment, but he did just miracles with the Lions. And boy, it would be nice to see somebody stick around for another year or so and see a little bit more of his efforts kind of reach the finish line, so to speak, because there's a lot of optimism there. I watched an interview with Peyton yesterday on the Herd. He seems to be taking Houston very seriously. He has connections with Houston. I guess they used to scrimmage together. He knows a lot of the people there. He doesn't feel he's required to have a key quarterback, so to speak, in place. Do you think he'd really take that Houston job?
I think it might be the best job on the market. And there's
the draft capital is amazing.
The draft capital is incredible. They have a chance to draft and groom a new quarterback. They have a division that, I mean, what can you say about Tennessee? They're dinosaur offense. Indianapolis is running a quarterback every year. You know, Jacksonville's getting better. We understand that, but we're not anointing them 13-4. This is an opportunity. If he, for example, Peyton's been linked to Vic Fangio, who was out of coaching last year, and before his failed head coaching stint at Denver, he was a fine defensive coordinator with the Chicago Bears and has a fine defensive background. If you put Peyton in with the offense and Vic Fangio with the defense, you build up that room with a lot of good draft choices. You groom a new quarterback in a league that's winnable. Why not?
Yeah. I guess the another comment that I'd like to make is that the season of variance is finally almost over, and it's a real sense of relief for me. This has been, I'm going to be going through all 272 games either next week or the week after, game by game by game. I'm looking at changing the filters. Should I be tightening or widening my filters for the games I'm picking? I don't even know what my record was on just strict sides if I had played them against the spread, but I do know that it was not good. I mean, and I hadn't looked since the midway part of the season how I was doing, because I don't sit there and chase the I'm not watching it. The only thing is that it's in my focus is, okay, what's ahead of me, and what's the best work I can do? What's the best way to wager on these upcoming games? And due to the previous betting strategies that we've discussed and have implemented, I saved my season. I mean, this was a very bad year for my metrics, I believe. I think that's what my study is going to show, and I bet my way out of it, which is nice. But hey, I need my model. My model's been very, very good over the last 9 years, and this was a very down year, and the variance just seemed to always work against me. And I'm good riddance. I feel such a sense of relief that this season is almost over. What are your thoughts on this season?
Well, first of all, it was a great season. You know, I enjoyed the season. I stuck to my guns. My metrics did fine, but that's not the point here. The point is, that's what the off season is for. I think we're going to have conversations during the spring and summer and stuff like that, and talking about exactly what you did. I could tell you were changing your stripes in the middle of the season, and you did implement strategies that saved your season, but that's not, in my opinion, that's not where you want to hang your bread and butter. Your bread and butter should still be straight bets and getting the maximum value out of those straight bets, and to use these other things as positive EV hedges based on different game times and other strategies. But that should never be your first focus. And in some ways, the last 3 to 4 weeks, sitting from afar and not discussing this with you until now, it's almost become your first focus, as you either not trusted your numbers as much, not have been willing to bet straight bets, whatever the reason being, you've adjusted. But it's not, for the novice handicapper or for the person that's not as well skilled in metrics and stuff, they're going to lose. They're going to be in serious trouble if they switch strategies in the middle of the year.
Well, you touch on something that's critical, because generally, I would advise people stick with a process that works. And you're going to go through your ups and you're going to go through your downs. And I pivoted, okay? And I wouldn't normally recommend pivoting. I mean, I strongly recommend being open to changing and evolving, but I pivoted mid-season, and I'm not sure that that's normally smart to make such a strong pivot. But it worked.
I'll say one thing, as far as what I might look at during the season. You mentioned you don't look at certain things during the season. I know because of my team sheets, if I've lost 4 times in a row betting on or against a particular team, I know, and I want that information. I want to know, how come I keep betting Tampa, or how come I keep betting so-and-so if I'm losing? Am I behind the curve on this? What's going on? So individual teams, because I record exactly what I played on each team sheet, I know what I've done week to week. I know where my power ratings are. I know where the value has been. And typically, for you too, I would think, with your trailing 5 weeks is your example. My example here is that getting ahead of the curve. I'll give you an example. You were ahead of the curve on Washington in 2021. I feel I was strongly ahead of the curve on Cincinnati this year. I was 3 weeks ahead of everybody else, knowing that Cincinnati was not going to be a team that was failing in the middle of the year, but instead they're getting better when other teams are treading water. And I was able to see that because of my performance and my team sheets and looking at the data head to head and saying, wait a second, I have Cincinnati rated higher than a lot of people, and I'm comfortable with that. Those are the only adjustments that I'm kind of
well, you
willing
had
to make during
Miami
the
at
year.
#7 at one point, Ron. So your teeter-totter's kind of in the middle there.
Well, the other thing to realize is the injuries changed the dynamics there. And when Tua was concussed, I didn't have to worry about that metric. Cincinnati didn't face injuries.
Still healthy.
Yeah.
No, but I'll tell you, the Green Bay this year was unbelievable because caught Green Bay before people knew they sucked, caught them on the way down, and caught them back on the way up, and finished perfectly against the Lions, knowing that the Lions were still better. And sometimes you get those perfect trip teams, and then I always have a team that just kicks my ass all year long. So I don't. I'm in a love-hate relationship with Jacksonville. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I know that one. Well, we talked at the beginning of the year in September, and I said, wait a second, Detroit is 2 games better than Chicago. In my power ratings, they were 2.5 points better to start the year. There were so many things, and yet I had Chicago 2 of the first 3 weeks, and I said Chicago was going to be 50-50 against San Francisco and Trey Lance. And of course, I had a big position against Chicago, but you just got to take it matchup by matchup and game by game. So even after 4 or 5 weeks, when Chicago looked like, hey, we're 3-2, or we're 2-1, whatever their record was after 3 weeks, and so on, Chicago was not a good team, and people were buying into the record as opposed to what the performance was on the field.
I want to share this chart with everybody. I think Mike Clay tweeted this out. What an awesome chart this is of all 32 teams, the years that the head coach, the coordinators, and the GMs were hired, where the vacancies are. And it appears that the ones in I don't know what the color coding is just by year, isn't it?
Yes, color coding's by year, but boy, can you pick out some things really quickly, like how often an offensive coordinator gets changed and how raw all these offensive coordinators are.
The coordinators are unbelievable. I mean, look at all those 2022s. I mean, that's just outrageous.
Yeah, and when you have a major roster upheaval, it can be good in the New York Giants case, because look what they were coming from. They were coming from a position of weakness to strength with their offensive coaching staff in 2021 versus 2022. But in other cases, even with Vegas, Vegas, I'm looking at the Chargers. Of course, the Chargers, now they don't have one, but Lombardi was fired today.
Right.
But that change was certainly a negative for their offense, because nobody really liked the play calling. And it was evident 3 days ago with the fact that they kept passing the ball up 27 when they have Austin Eckler in the backfield.
I can't even talk about the Chargers. They find, I mean, as a Lions fan, that's the only team that I feel, or the only fan base that I feel worse for than myself. I mean, there's nothing worse than having a team that should be right there. I mean, if you're living in mediocrity, that's easier to live with. But when there's optimism going into every year and you flame out the same way every year, God, is that heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, that roster is playoff. Well, it's been playoff worthy. We've talked about it probably 8 of the last 9 years now, and whenever they made the playoffs, which is what, twice, to lose the way they've lost, not good.
Bring up something to talk about, Ron.
Referees swallowed their whistle. I mentioned that on a previous
Yeah.
show today, and you could see it. You could see obvious offensive holding calls not being called. You could see them letting them play down the field. It affected the over-unders last week. I'll be paying attention, for example, with referee assignments this week. I think they carefully handpicked those referees. For people who did their homework on the referees, you saw 6 referees that really were trending toward the we don't make many calls during the season referee crews. Now, I know it's an all-star crew, so your head referee is not necessarily with your regular crew all the time, but your head referee sets the tone. And I think this was a let them play week, and it'll be interesting to see what happens this coming week.
Yeah, I was pleased to see a lot of no calls that should have been no calls, so to speak. Even when they worked against me, I was like, well, that's the way the game should be played. That should have been a no call. And, regular season, we would have gotten that, but we didn't get it this time.
So you have a Monday night game. Deion Sanders was on the Manning cast. Many people caught it. I don't know if you caught it, but when they had the roughing the passer call in that game, if you want to call it roughing, the guy barely touched him and got to the ground.
They're officially changing it to irritating the passer.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what happened. Deion Sanders went off, and it was funny. He had the Manning brothers in, just hysterics. They were just laughing. He said, put a skirt on these guys, put flag football, and so on. And that's the fine line between player safety and these primetime games where if you touch a quarterback, it's just terrible. And those are the calls that the eye in the sky, which actually changed about 5 or 6 calls this weekend. I don't know if you're aware of it, Chris, if you watch some of the games where they changed the call within seconds from New York. They have to be able to have some leeway to change the call on these roughing passes. That's my personal preference.
Yeah, they're going to have to address changing penalties or lack of. But boy, that's opening a can of worms.
I know. It opens up to scrutiny.
I don't really feel like looking backward anymore. And my outlook on this week is hurry up and wait. I see no reason to take action at this point. I feel the 2 Sunday games are lined properly. I don't know whether you see it on your screen, but we've got 4.5 to 6 sitting dead on Buffalo right now.
I'm going to pull that up. I'm a little surprised at the line. Are you surprised at the line?
Yeah, it's higher than I expected.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there looking at the 6. I can bet it right now. But I don't want the 6.
Yeah. On my screen, I don't see 6s.
South Point has a 6.
Okay. Well, that's not accessible to me, but they're taking a stance on that particular game. Cincinnati is playing just lights out defense right now, fundamentally sound. The one area they lack is their ability to rush the quarterback. So Josh Allen's going to have time in the pocket. Josh Allen has to cut down on his turnovers.
Well, we see how his game has gradually declined with the absence of his quarterback coach. And isn't he the guy helping out some guy named Jones?
Some guy named Jones who looks like an all-pro.
Impressive work there. I think this Dallas-San Francisco game is pretty much exactly where it should be. I'm going to be involved in the Saturday games to which extent I'm not sure yet. I certainly like Jacksonville. But Kansas City could bury him. I mean, this is a letdown spot for the Jags. It's a situation where things could fall apart on them because Kansas City isn't going to, let them back in the game. Well, I just don't see the Jags being able to mount huge comebacks against Kansas City, so to speak, in the same fashion as they just came from. And it just feels like they'll be off their game. This is a stage event. They made it through. They got their respect. The season is a success. There's no pressure on them to win. If things turn against them, they could really just be complacent and, well, we weren't going to win it all anyway. We overachieved. Those are the things I worry about in this game. What do you think on that game?
Well, what you just said, there's a metric for that in terms of teams that their season is a success, rather they win or lose the second game in the playoff. It doesn't apply in the first game. It actually is favorable in the first game. 13 of the last 16 times a team like the Jags faced a first playoff game situation with their statistical profile, they win, or at least they cover. And now it's 14 out of 17. But this is a situation that goes behind them, and it actually favors Kansas City.
Yeah.
I went back and I looked at the previous game that they played, where Lawrence, that was the start of his ascension. That's when he started to get good. He had a very good game against Kansas City. The problem is Kansas City had Jacksonville had a +3 turnover ratio. In that game, Jacksonville did not turn the ball over. Kansas City turned it over 3 times, and Kansas City still won by 10. That worries me that I don't know how Jacksonville stops Mahomes and the offense. Only if Mahomes stops himself, it just looks like Jacksonville's going to have to outscore Kansas City.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm just not a totals guy. It just seems like this game. It just seems like Jacksonville's going to score 21-24 easily. 21's easy for them, I think. So if they get 24, is it 34? It just seems like this is an over game. It just seems like this should be 54, and the 53 is still a bargain.
It seems like either a backdoor over,
right,
where Kansas City is winning comfortably, and then they allow a touchdown that affects either the spread or the total. I like that comment. Lawrence was still grinning, and he should be. You're down 27-0, and nothing's gone right, and then all of a sudden you're playing another week.
It was great. Nice to see him go to such a great restaurant afterward. I love the
Waffle House. I saw that.
I wish they had the Waffle House here.
I've been at those places. The waffles aren't bad.
Now, the Philadelphia basically rolled the Giants at the beginning of the season, correct?
Yeah. December 11th, 48 points they put up at the New York Giants. Same kind of situation. The Giants won their season last week. The only benefit that the Giants have here that doesn't fall completely in that bad metric is that this is a divisional opponent. It's their third time. They're 0-2, and that kind of mindset is a little different. They're not complacent here. They know they have to climb again over Philly either now or in the future. They know it's a tough task, but they're going to be so mentally focused. Yes, they've won the season by being where they are, the New York Giants, but this is Philadelphia. They played them 2 weeks ago. I could see the Giants contending. The roster doesn't smell like it's a contending roster, but they're getting the most out of their talent.
They are, and I believe I will. I don't know whether you know this or not, but Tomlin has never had a losing season, and Kansas City and Philadelphia may be a popular teaser combination.
Yeah, what a shocker!
Which one of those go down?
If I picked either one to go down, I'd probably be Philly, only because we don't know completely how healthy Jalen Hurts is. And the fact that running is so much a part of his game, 10.5 rushes per game when he's healthy. If he's held to 3 or 4 rushes because he's not healthy, then the Giants have one less thing that they have to contend with. And they have a lot of things to contend with defensively. I personally, don't think either team goes down because of the situations. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be Philly again, going down. I think, by the way, I would have had the Chargers no problem against Kansas City.
Oh, yeah. The comment I'd like to make on this is I don't want to tease that. Like if those are the two teams I want, I'm going to shop as diligently as possible for the best money lines that I can find. I don't want to be laying 2.5s in today's NFL, and I'm avoiding those as often as possible. So it just sometimes you can't quite get there, and it's tough to find the right prices. And people don't have access to the same prices that I may have. I get some really good money lines out there sometimes, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, we're talking a significantly different. So that helps me out with my betting, but I'm a little leery of laying 2.5 on teasers. Even the 1.5 scare me. There's just so many goofy things. I mean, I think there was at least one missed extra point yesterday in the game, right? So
well, look at the Jacksonville Charger game, for example. A penalty on Bosa when he threw his helmet down changed the extra point from the 2 to the 1. Instead of going to make it 30-27, they said, we're 1 yard away. We have a quarterback with a big reach against a team that doesn't defend the run that well and is in a state that's not a good state. They just gave up a penalty. Their mindset isn't there. All of a sudden, it's a 2-point game. Obviously, the tees didn't come into play in that game, but what if there's a missed extra point or a 2-point try or something crazy goes on? The numbers 2 and 5, they're all live in the playoffs.
I agree. Now, I think we can all remember what happened last year, but can you remember what happened 2 years ago with the number 1 seeds?
I can't remember 2 weeks ago with the number 1 seeds right
both
now off the top
seeds,
of my head.
Last year, both number 1 seeds hit the road.
Yeah, well, Tennessee, we know, was a fake number 1.
Right.
The other one was at Green Bay, and Green Bay placed, they had the 32nd best, quote unquote, special team defense. And if you remember what happened in that game, that special team offense and defense absolutely imploded in that game, and they gave San Francisco free points. So I understand that. I don't know about soft. In some cases, you don't want the rest because you're rolling so much. In Philly's case, you want the rest because you needed it for Hurts. In Kansas City's case, it's neither here nor there, but Reed's been pretty good with rest in terms of executing a winning game plan. So this year might be different to me. I don't know how you feel about it.
I haven't absorbed it. I'm just sitting back. I don't feel any urgency. I know what my numbers are saying. I know where I'm leaning. But I feel as the week goes on, more information comes along. The games get a little bit of a better perspective. So I'm in hurry up and wait mode on this stuff.
Your banner says it. The lines get tighter. I know the recreational bettor is going to bet more because it's a playoff game and more because it's a Super Bowl. But those are the games you might have much less of an edge. So you should be betting less.
Yeah, and that's the point of the banner is it really hit me hard this morning because I finished the season well, and I'm excited off a good weekend and want to keep betting. Mm-hmm. Big games, they're good games. All the games are good. We don't have a toilet game, which is nice. Yeah. And so you want to be involved, you want to bet, and it's frustrating to be disciplined and say, well, geez, I may not bet much this week. You're in that groove the whole season long, and you've got these toilet rolls going every week, and all of a sudden, you're sitting there looking for a fix. I mean, it's like, oh, what am I going to bet? What am I going to bet? And as you referenced, the bigger the game, the tighter these lines are. And if you think that there's anything off about these totals or these spreads, there's nothing off about them. So these are sharp lines, and you're going to find yourself in a lot better shape more often than not just being a spectator oftentimes.
Yeah, pivoting is probably the name of the game, and to find an edge in a different market, a market that I noticeably is not in my wheelhouse, but Ted and I spoke about on Friday, was the way Tampa Bay executes his game plan and the fact that they're not hurry up, they're one-dimensional. We talked about betting a first half under in the Tampa Bay Dallas game, which did come through, because Tampa Bay their offense is on like cruise control until there's a sense of urgency. And that first half, it was as predictable. That's the problem with defensive coaches, I think. It was as predictable as can be. And Dallas was ready to play against that particular type of defense. So I had to go out of my comfort zone to find a play, and I didn't, break the bank on it by any means whatsoever. But it's just the edges are just too small. The odds makers know what they're doing when there's 4 high-profile teams in the NFL that are playing on any given day. It's easy for them to set a number.
Now I'm curious. What did you make that line, Dallas, Tampa?
The Dallas Tampa Bay line from last week.
From last night.
From last night. But I actually made the line Dallas 3.5.
Okay. I don't understand. There was a lot of people that really thought Tampa Bay was a gift, and I'm just wondering if they're modeling people, whether they're the priors muck up their numbers. But I couldn't come remotely close to even considering Tampa Bay last night.
Tampa Bay had a very low power rating on my scale. And even though I allow 1.5 points for home field in the playoffs, I still could not come up with a number that was lower than 3.5.
Which is strong for you.
I guess.
Usually you're going to favor those home dogs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a reason to sort of like the home dog, only because you don't know. I mean, Dallas at any minute can play to its level of competition. Mike McCarthy, like your banner said, there are times where Metrics Mike, as I call him, doesn't even know he's at the same stadium as the game that's being played. And he gets in the way of things. But his team is much more talented than a Tampa Bay team that's missing so many pieces.
Can Leftwich get another job?
Well, he's going to have to prove himself all over again. Yeah.
He should go to college, shouldn't he?
Well, I think take a guy like Eric Bieniemy, who's at San Francisco or at Kansas City, and he can't buy a head coaching job. What does he have to do? If he doesn't get a job this time around, I think he should just take a college job. They're paying more money these days. He can run his own program. He's proven everything he needs to do creativity-wise in the NFL. If it's not this year, just go to the college next year.
Boy, look how few teams have had a head coach longer than 2017.
Yeah,
it's crazy. You can count them on one hand. I mean, the turnover on these head coaches is just it's extraordinary. The San Diego move was a money move to just keep them. Is that the way you assess that?
I would like to explore this topic, especially with Ted on Friday, because he's a part of the Brandon Staley fan club, quote unquote. He just doesn't get him. But take a guy like Zach Taylor of Cincinnati. He was thought of as being completely overmatched as a head coach. And now no one's talking about him anymore. Obviously, he has Joe Burrow, but he's not getting in the way of anything. And he's not making bonehead decisions. And it's hard to be a head coach in the NFL. There's only 32 of them to begin with. If you're not Lovie Smith with a horrible track record and he doesn't belong, if you're one of these guys like Zach Taylor, you have to give him a couple of years. The Atlanta coach, you have to give him a couple of years to figure out what he's doing. And I think it's all right to give Staley a third year, but his errors really stand out, and he better make a great offensive coordinator hire in place of Lombardi to make this right. I'm okay with him getting this third year, but the buck has to stop in the third year.
Frank Reich's going to want another head coaching job. He's not going to want to be a coordinator, is he?
I don't think he fits there.
I'm out of bullets. It's one of these weeks where I'm kind of just digesting things. As I mentioned, it's hard to really find, value. As the bigger the game, the lower the value. So,
yeah, I think on Friday we can flesh out some more things. We could possibly talk about the prop market, what's going on with the coaching market, that kind of thing. Right now, it feels like a Monday, but it's really a Tuesday since we had a Monday night game. So we'll just see. There are things to watch for in each game. We'll cover them on Friday. But right now, I'm out of bullets too.
Yeah, you holding in some gas there?
No, just processing. It's like you said, kind of hurry up and wait kind of thing. We've got our numbers. We know where we are with different things. I'm starting to work on the matchups right now. I'm looking at certain players, for example. I mentioned earlier, just to mention something about Cincinnati. They had allowed 2 sacks or fewer in 7 or 8 consecutive games, but the floodgates opened up against Baltimore because Cincinnati had an injury pregame and during the game. Now, what I found interesting is that Joe Mixon was subbed out. One of the announcers made a very crucial point. Sometimes they actually are very smart there. They substituted Joe Mixon out of the backfield in Cincinnati because of his blocking skill or lack thereof. They used Perrine as their lead blocker. And that's an interesting concept for game planning and game flow, in that if Cincinnati feels that the Buffalo pass rush is going to bother them, then Joe Mixon could be a liability if he's pass blocking in that particular game. Conversely, with Buffalo, you don't see as much Singletary at times. You're seeing the rookie running back Cook because of his versatility in terms of pass catching and running the ball in the backfield. It's a 50-50 timeshare where it used to be 65-35, 70-30. Those are the things that I'm working on right now, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, to isolate what the matchups, it's kind of it's not a trailing 5-week thing, but it's kind of a subset of the trailing 5 weeks. What's the usage of different players during these last 5 weeks, and what are they doing differently during the last 5 weeks?
I think that everybody can recognize that the Bills are not the same Bills.
No.
But and so they can somehow equate that to it's an either or sort of thing, and I don't look at it that way. I think Cincinnati's good and they were underrated, but they've got their own problems. So you can't just sit there and blindly take Cincinnati just because Buffalo's not as strong as they were before, because Cincinnati isn't either. They're both weaker.
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati has some incredible strong points that will go against Buffalo's strong points. The 2 areas I worry about Cincinnati: pass protection and pass rush. They're not going to get a lot of pressure on Buffalo's quarterback, Josh Allen, and they're going to be tasked based on last week and whatever the injury situation is to have maybe one extra body in pass protection against Buffalo's pass rush.
What the hell happened to Delvin Cook? I mean, that guy was a monster, and I can't remember the last time I saw that guy go on a heater during the game. He's really winding down fast, or do I have a misperception there?
I think they just have a lot of weapons. They have Jefferson. They have the combination of Thielen and Osborne. They have
but that should open it up for him.
It should open it up for him, but their game plan without Mike Zimmer there has been fewer runs.
Hey, but I forgot to mention that. I must have blocked it out as like a childhood trauma. I was really pissed that Minnesota wasn't able to keep that game closer. Just a disappointment there. It cost me.
Well, you have a bad defense in Minnesota, and they're just so susceptible. I mean, if they're not getting to the quarterback, that was along with Miami, the worst of the 14 defenses against the pass that were in the game. And the way they've managed Daniel Jones, it was a mismatch against the Minnesota defense. Minnesota could outscore them. They could win, close game because they've been winning them 13 of them or something like that, 11-0 in close games. And the Giants are playing over their head. But at no point was Minnesota a superior team.
How many games in a row has San Francisco won now?
10 or 11.
I think it's 11 or 12. You would think that they would fade in the playoffs and they wouldn't be able to keep it up. But I ran across some data that actually supports San Francisco to continue the success. But I'm not sharing it all.
Okay. Just with me. San Francisco, if you take them let's take them in quarterly blocks, quarters 1 to 4, the first quarter of the season, they had 2 different quarterbacks. They had injuries galore. They had Ward was on PUP in the secondary. So on the second quarter, Jimmy G is thriving. Everything's going well. They got some players back, but they're still injured in a lot of spots. They have no running back at all. The third quarter, they trade for McCaffrey. Now they're at the end of the third quarter, they lose Jimmy G at the same time. Their defense is coming together. And now the fourth quarter, where they have all these weapons all at the same time and they're all healthy. It's like 4 different teams for San Francisco.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's an interesting handicap, one that maybe I should pick your brain on as well, because how do you set a power rating for a team that every week has a different lineup and is completely different team than they were in week 2 or 3? And where do you put their metrics in a trailing 5 weeks if they're using different players every week?
Yeah, that's an excellent comment. And I believe that what I do overcomes that, because I see other people that use metrics that really focus on just a handful of metrics as their key metrics, and they probably don't use the number of metrics that I use with my inputs. I don't know how many inputs other people use, but I doubt if they're using over 50 like I am. And I believe that what I do overcomes exactly what you're speaking of, because your whole team may be constantly evolving, but if you're measuring all aspects of team performance and you're weighting them the way that I weight them, then you don't see these extreme ups and downs when this happens, because a team may, change their look on offense. They may change their look on defense, special teams, or whatever it may be. But I believe it is a much wider game of influence of factors that matter than I think most people do. I think people focus on, at the most, maybe 10 or 11 categories. I don't know. But there are so many moving parts, so many players. You want as many inputs as possible, quite frankly, without getting too carried away in the minutia of it. Did I explain that?
Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to, and this is these last 5 minutes, we're brainstorming right now. And so this is a topic neither one of us expected to be talking about right now in our casual conversation. But it's very interesting to me because we're dealing with data. If somebody is looking at this game and they're treating San Francisco like they were the same team week 5 as they were week 8 and week 11, whatever, they're missing something there. My thinking is, for me, I go back and look at, what's their run to pass ratio? How are they adjusting based on the personnel they're using now versus the personnel they used 5 weeks ago? What are they doing with Brock Purdy's game now that he has 5, 6, 7 games under his belt that they didn't do when he had 2 games under his belt? What are they doing now that their defensive line is completely healthy? Are they blitzing 10% of the time, or are they up to 20% of the time? I'm looking at all these different things because their team has changed. And if I'm just going casually along and saying, here's what my number is and so on, then I'm not doing my homework.
No. And this touches on a subject I mentioned it on Twitter within the last week. Strength of schedule. I believe what you just spoke about with San Francisco falls in line with strength of schedule. And as time goes on, we were ahead of the curve on home field advantage. I remember, a handful of years going, keep on thinking that it's 3 points. Keep on thinking it's 3 points. It's only going to help me. And I'm getting to the point where I'm getting the same feelings on strength of schedule. I just think that the inputs that affect are just, they're voluminous was the word I used. There are so many factors to deciding strength of schedule. Even if you're going game by game and analyzing the exact time that the teams faced each other, there are still so many factors that don't show up in stats, that you don't have access to, that you can't quantify. The obvious things are effort, but there's not the huge, even though you see these wide score variations, and teams can get blown out. Although this season had the closest margin of victory by a landslide compared to previous years. The very worst teams playing their good game can certainly beat the best teams playing an off game. And factoring in all the effort and all that, the situations where these guys faced each other, it just seems like a washout. I'm really starting to feel it's just a washout.
Well, I have strong feelings about strength of schedule, and you may agree or disagree. I think you can set a preseason strength of schedule based on your overall opponents, not win record or anything like that, but based on power rating strictly at the start of the year, and use that very successfully for season win totals and other stuff like that. However, you know how long those strength of schedule ratings are useful for? 10
2
days.
games?
Yeah. After the second day game, it means nothing. Trey Lance was the starting quarterback week 1. We come back to that example. His second game in 3 years, his second meaningful game in 3 years, he was the starting quarterback. San Francisco's power rating week 1 for me was completely different than what it would have been with Jimmy G at quarterback week 1. And that's why Chicago was a live play then. San Francisco's power rating now, with Brock Purdy having 7 games, is much stronger than Trey Lance having no games at the beginning of the year, based on everything else that's going on. Strength of schedule is a week-to-week thing after you finish 2 weeks in the season. And
I just have a feeling that
it's crazy.
Once you've gone through this full year schedule and you start getting into the later part of the schedule and people are trying to find their edges, and I believe it's a cop-out to look at strength of schedule, frankly, because I think once you get to week 16, 17, 18, the playoffs, you're so battle-tested, you're so battle-worn. Every single team has faced adversities that have made it difficult on them, and I believe that it just completely narrows the variance of strength of schedule much more than people realize. Any logic?
I use it. Yeah, there are 2 points that I use strength of schedule and nothing else after week 4. After week 4, and I have my first quartile report, I do look, and I think it's helpful what that second quartile looks like, because 3-1 teams can be complacent. 1-3 teams, they have to fire right away. So I look at that. And the only other time I look at that, and this is new for this year, because other than that, after week 4, I never looked at strength of schedule. I don't need to. It's just the opponents in front of you. But now that you can place in-season win bets and division bets and this and that, and whatever, I will look a little bit at what's coming, week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, what the quarterback situations are, because strength of schedule doesn't automatically factor in the fact that you're playing backup quarterbacks sometimes. This quarterback got hurt and you played them when that quarterback was hurt. That next quarterback came up. Even the dogs are barking. Play the dogs. I think Chris muted himself, but basically what I'm saying about strength of schedule is that you can use it for future plays, but don't get married to it after week 4.
Well, I don't know whether you agree with what Gizmo had to say there, but he had his say. Sorry about that.
And I think he said, look at the dogs this week.
It's funny. Nice little side topics. We're at our hour mark. I think that's about it. That's all I got. I'm out of bullets.
We'll save everything to Friday. Enjoy the rest of the day and stuff like that. Any questions that come up, I will check YouTube and answer any questions you guys have. Otherwise, get ready for another fun week of football.
Yeah, and I have been, I have not done well responding to YouTube comments, and I apologize. It's really disrespectful not to, but I just haven't had the time. I'm not goofing off or anything. We greatly appreciate everybody's participation, and I need to go back and check some comments. So
yeah, go back, check some comments, and finally, thank you to everybody who did comment or send me a DM or an email and stuff when I was sending some stuff out and whatever, because I appreciate it. We appreciate all the positive feedback or any feedback that we get as we try to wing our way through brainstorming techniques. Hopefully we're adding value to everybody's handicapping.
We will be back. Hopefully, are we doing 10 a.m. on Friday?
Not sure of the time, but Friday, I would probably say 11.
All right. Thanks for joining, everybody. Good luck, and you don't have to rush and bet anything. I don't think things are going to move much. See you later.